They said it was just training, just another drill on the mats, just another round of close quarters conditioning at the Naval Special Warfare Facility in Coronado. But when Lieutenant Commander Nora Garrett tapped twice and Staff Sergeant Reese Brennan didn't let go, when his forearm stayed locked across her throat for 8.6 seconds past regulation, that wasn't training anymore. That was a message, a declaration written in bruised tissue and stolen oxygen, that this annex wasn't governed by rank or procedure. It was ruled by whoever could hit hardest and hold longest consequences, be damned. So he choked her, held it past protocol, past reason, past the point where her vision tunneled and her fingers clawed uselessly at his forearm. He held it in front of everyone, instructors and recruits alike, until she went limp in his arms like a puppet with cut strings. And when she finally stood back up, throat already darkening with the shadow of his grip, she didn't scream, didn't threaten, didn't even raise her voice. She just looked at him with the flat, measuring stare of a sniper acquiring a target. But she didn't forget. And 3 days later, with every pair of eyes in that compound locked on a demonstration cage and a command master chief standing silent witness in the observation deck, she wouldn't need to lay a finger on him. Because when the evidence played across those screens, when the timestamps and tap counts scrolled past in cold digital certainty, Brennan didn't just lose the fight. He lost everything. But before we show you the exact moment his world collapsed before those screens lit up with proof that would end a decorated Marine's career, we need to go back. Back to where this really started, 96 hours before that choke in a briefing room, half a country away, where a woman with a sniper's eyes and a dead mentor's legacy made a choice that would change everything. The briefing room at Naval Operations Command in Norfolk sat 3 stories underground, all concrete walls and fluorescent lighting that never quite reached the corners. No windows, no natural light, just the steady hum of climate control and the weight of classified decisions pressing down from above. Lieutenant Commander Nora Garrett sat alone at the long aluminum table, hands flat on the cold surface, waiting. She'd been waiting for 6 months. 6 months since the phone call that shattered her world. 6 months since Master Chief Wade Hollister, the man who'd trained her, mentored her, saved her life in a firefight outside Helmand Province, died in what the official report called a training accident. 6 months of knowing in her bones that it was no accident at all. The door opened. Admiral James Carson entered without ceremony, a folder tucked under one arm, and the kind of weathered face that came from 30 years of making hard calls. He didn't salute, neither did she. This wasn't that kind of meeting. Commander Garrett, he settled into the chair across from her, didn't open the folder. You know why you're here. Coronado, her voice came out steady, controlled. Years of operational discipline, keeping everything locked down tight. The Combat Conditioning Annex. Carson's eyes narrowed slightly. 3 informal complaints in the last 8 months, all involving the same instructor. Staff Sergeant Reese Brennan, Marine Raider, Bronze Star recipient, 2 Afghanistan tours. He paused, let that sink in. Decorated, respected, connected. And dangerous. We don't know that for certain. That's the problem. Carson finally opened the folder, slid a photograph across the table. A man in his late 30s, athletic build, regulation, fade, the kind of face that could have been carved from granite. The kind of face that smiled without warmth reaching past his mouth. The complaints never went formal. No evidence. No witnesses willing to testify. Just whispers and rumors, and Marines who suddenly request transfers. Garrett picked up the photo, studied it with the same focus she'd once used to calculate windage and bullet drop at 1,200 meters. Master Chief Hollister was investigating this program when he died. I know. Carson's voice softened a fraction. Wade was my friend too, Commander. We served together in Desert Storm, but his death was ruled accidental. Equipment failure during a fast rope exercise. No foul play indicated. No foul play they could prove. She set the photo down, met Carson's gaze dead on. Sir, with respect, Wade Hollister survived 30 years as a SEAL. 2 wars, dozens of black operations, more combat drops than most operators see in a lifetime. He doesn't die because a rope breaks. Carson was quiet for a long moment. Outside, somewhere in the maze of corridors, footsteps echoed and faded. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of something he couldn't quite say officially. The Annex operates in a gray zone, Commander. Joint military combat training, multiple service branches, high-intensity conditioning. It's designed to push people past their limits. Sometimes that means traditional oversight doesn't quite fit. Someone needs to make it fit. Yes. He pulled another document from the folder. That's why you're here. I'm offering you a rotation assignment. 60 days at Coronado Compliance and Protocol Oversight for the Integration Program. You'll observe, document, ensure all training exercises meet regulation standards. He slid the paper toward her. It's voluntary. Your record is spotless. You could decline and no one would question it. Garrett didn't touch the document. Who's protecting Brennan? That's not, sir. She leaned forward slightly. 3 complaints that never went formal. An investigation that died with the investigator. Someone with enough juice to make problems disappear. So I'll ask again, who's protecting him? Carson's jaw tightened. Captain Marshal Teague, JZUK. He was Brennan's commanding officer in Afghanistan Marja Offensive 2010. They went through hell together. Teague's a rising star, and Brennan is his proof of concept for aggressive combat conditioning. He paused. If you take this assignment, you'll be going up against more than one staff sergeant. You'll be challenging an entire command philosophy. Good. Garrett pulled the document towards her, found a pen in her pocket. Wade Hollister believed in doing things right. Honor and discipline, not just results. He died trying to prove both were possible. She signed her name in clean, precise strokes. I'm not letting that mean nothing. Carson nodded slowly, something like approval flickering across his weathered features. Hollister trained you well. Best sniper in your class, top 2% of Bud's candidates. You've earned your trident 10 times over. He stood collected the folder. But Commander, you need to understand what you're walking into. The Annex isn't run by the chain of command on paper. It's run by whoever commands respect on the mats. And right now, that's Brennan. Then I'll have to change that. She stood as well, came to attention. When do I leave? Tomorrow, 0600. Fly into San Diego, report to the base commander for initial briefing, then straight to the Annex. Carson headed for the door, paused with his hand on the handle. One more thing. Teague will know you're coming, he'll know why, and he'll do everything in his power to protect his Marine. Let him try, sir. Carson almost smiled. Hollister said you were stubborn, said it was your greatest strength and your biggest weakness. He opened the door. Let's hope he was right about the first part. After he left, Garrett remained standing in that windowless room for a long moment. Her hand drifted to her left shoulder, traced the ridge of scar tissue through her uniform shirt. 4 years ago, Helmand Province. A Taliban ambush that should have killed her entire squad. Would have if Wade Hollister hadn't thrown himself between her and a burst of automatic fire-taken rounds meant for her chest, then still managed to return fire and coordinate their extraction. He'd survived that day, barely, spent 3 months recovering, another 6 in physical therapy. But he survived, and he came back stronger, more determined to make sure the next generation of warriors were trained right, trained with honor. And now he was gone. Dead in a training accident that every instinct she possessed screamed was murder dressed up in official language. Garrett pulled out her phone, opened the photo gallery, scrolled to an image she'd looked at 1,000 times. Her and Hollister at the sniper qualification range, both in ghillie suits covered in dirt and camouflage. Her holding up a target sheet, 98 out of 100 possible points. Him grinning like a proud father, arm around her shoulders. Mission accepted, Master Chief, she whispered to the empty room. I'll finish what you started. The next morning, 36,000 feet over Arizona, Garrett sat in a window seat watching the desert scroll past below. The commercial flight was nearly empty, just a handful of passengers scattered through the cabin. She'd traveled in plainclothes civilian carry-on, nothing that marked her as military, except the posture she couldn't quite shake and the way her eyes automatically mapped exits and assessed potential threats. Her phone buzzed. Text message from a number she didn't recognize. Welcome to California, Commander. Looking forward to working with you. SS Giant Brennan. So Teague had already briefed him. Good. Let them know she was coming. Let them prepare whatever welcome they had planned. She'd faced down enemy combatants in urban kill zones and mountain passes. A hostile training facility didn't scare her. She typed back, "See you on the mat, Staff Sergeant." Senate turned the phone off, In her carry-on, wrapped in a soft cloth, rested Wade Hollister's service pistol. A Kimber 1911 .45 caliber custom grips the frame worn smooth from decades of use. He'd left it to her in his will, along with a handwritten note she'd memorized. Nora, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it. Don't mourn. Finish the mission. The Annex needs someone who understands that discipline isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. Make them understand. Make them remember. Wade. The plane descended through thin clouds toward San Diego. Garrett watched the city emerge below the naval base, sprawling along the coastline, silver-gray ships floating like chess pieces in the harbor. Somewhere down there at the Combat Conditioning Annex, Reese Brennan was waiting, confident, protected, untouchable. He had no idea what was coming. The Combat Conditioning Annex sat on the eastern edge of Naval Base Coronado, separated from the main Bud ES compound by a quarter-mile of access road and chain-link fencing. It wasn't the gleaming, well-maintained facility that tourists imagined when they thought of SEAL training. This was the ugly stepchild, the place where the real work happened, away from cameras and official oversight. Prefabricated buildings with peeling paint, outdoor obstacle courses rutted and worn, a large metal structure that served as the main training hall, all exposed beams and industrial lighting. Garrett pulled up in her rental car at 15:45 hours early enough to observe before official check-in at 1600. She sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes, windows down, listening to the sound of the place. Shouted cadence from a running formation, the rhythmic thud of bodies hitting padded mats, someone calling time on an exercise, voices responding with numbers. This was where Wade Hollister had died. Right there, probably near that tower, where ropes hung like gallows from a steel frame. The official report said he'd been supervising a fast rope exercise when the anchor point failed. 40 feet of free fall onto concrete. Death on impact. Except Wade had inspected every piece of equipment before every exercise. Had done it for 30 years without fail. Had taught her to do the same, drilled it into her skull, that preparation saved lives, and now she was supposed to believe he'd just missed a critical failure point. She got out of the car. The heat hit immediately, dry California sun baking off asphalt. She'd changed into her working uniform during a layover, standard Navy Type 3 camouflage with her silver oak leaf rank insignia on the collar. No ribbons, no trident, just clean lines and subdued markings. She wanted them to see the rank, not the decorations. Wanted to be underestimated. The main entrance was propped open. No guard, no checkpoint. Just a sign, Naval Special Warfare Combat Integration Program. Authorized personnel only. She walked in. The interior was exactly what she expected. Concrete floors, training mats sectioned off into different zones, free weights against one wall, heavy bags hanging from ceiling chains, a boxing ring in the far corner. The smell hit hard sweat and rubber and the metallic tang of athletic tape. The smell of her entire adult life distilled into a single space. Maybe 30 people were present, spread across various stations. Most were focused on their exercises, but she felt the attention shift the moment she crossed the threshold. Conversations didn't stop, exactly. They just got quieter, more careful. Eyes tracked her progress without seeming to watch. Near the center mat, 3 instructors stood in a loose cluster. All men, all fit, all wearing the kind of relaxed confidence that came from owning a space. The one in the middle turned as she approached. Mid-30s, maybe 6 feet, even broad shoulders, face like a granite cliff. The same man from the photograph. Reese Brennan. Staff Sergeant. She stopped 3 paces away, professional distance. Didn't offer her hand. Commander Garrett. His voice was smooth, measured, the kind of tone that could shift from casual to commanding in a heartbeat. Welcome to the Annex. We got word you'd be joining us for a rotation. Integration oversight, correct? Compliance and protocol review. 60-day assignment. Right, compliance. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We run a tight program here, ma'am. High intensity, high standards. The kind of training that produces operators who don't break under pressure. I'm familiar with high-intensity training, Staff Sergeant. I went through BOD S's, same as you. One of the other instructors, younger with fresh corporal stripes, made a sound that might have been a cough. Brennan's smile widened a fraction. Of course, ma'am. No disrespect intended. Just making sure you know what you're walking into. This isn't a classroom environment. Good, I prefer the field. She glanced around the facility, making mental notes of camera positions, emergency exits, the layout of training zones. I'll need access to all session logs, equipment maintenance records, and incident reports for the last 12 months. That can be arranged. Corporal Beckett here will get you set up in the admin office. He gestured to the younger instructor, who nodded but didn't quite meet her eyes. Anything else you need, just ask. We're here to support your mission, whatever that is. The emphasis on those last three words was slight but deliberate, a challenge wrapped in professional courtesy. My mission is simple, Staff Sergeant. Ensure all training protocols meet Navy regulations and that personnel safety remains the priority. She met his gaze, held it. I'm sure that aligns perfectly with your own objectives. Absolutely, Commander. He glanced at the other instructors, some silent communication passing between them. Well, we've got an advanced conditioning block starting in 15. You're welcome to observe. See how we do things here. I'll be observing everything, Staff Sergeant. That's why I'm here. She turned and followed Corporal Beckett toward a side office, conscious of the weight of Brennan's stare on her back. Conscious of the whispers, starting now, spreading through the facility like ripples on water. The new oversight officer. A woman. A SEAL, sure but oversight. Paper pusher. Clipboard warrior. Let them think that. Let them underestimate. She'd spent her career being underestimated, and she'd spent her career proving people wrong. The office was cramped, barely room for a desk and 2 filing cabinets. Corporal Beckett pulled out a chair for her, then hovered uncertainly near the door. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of nervous energy that spoke of someone who'd seen something and didn't know what to do about it. Thank you, Corporal. She kept her voice neutral. The files? Yes, ma'am. They're in the system. Digital access. I'll get you login credentials. He pulled out a notepad, scribbled something, then stopped. Looked at her. Looked away. Ma'am, is this conversation private? Garrett's instincts went on alert. It can be. Beckett closed the office door, lowered his voice. I heard you were coming. Heard you were here because of Master Chief Hollister. He swallowed hard. I wanted you to know he was a good man. What happened to him, it wasn't right. You were here when he died. Yes, ma'am, I saw the whole thing. Saw the rope snap, saw him fall. His hands clenched into fists, then released. But ma'am, I also saw Staff Sergeant Brennan inspecting that equipment 2 hours before. Saw him up on the platform messing with the anchor points. And when I asked what he was doing, he told me to mind my own business and get back to my station. The air in the small office suddenly felt very thin. Did you report that to anyone? I tried, went to the base safety officer, filed a preliminary statement. Beckett's voice dropped even lower. 3 days later, Captain Teague showed up at my quarters. Told me I must have been mistaken. That Brennan was just doing routine safety checks, same as always. Said if I kept pushing a false narrative, it would look bad for my career. Make people think I couldn't handle the pressure. Garrett kept her expression neutral, but inside ice formed along her spine. What did you do? I backed off, withdrew my statement, said I must have misunderstood what I saw. He finally met her eyes and she saw shame there, and fear, and something harder underneath. I've regretted it every day since. Because Master Chief Hollister was trying to help us, trying to fix this place, and we let him die for it. She leaned forward slightly. Corporal Beckett, I need you to understand something. If you're willing to testify to what you just told me, if you're willing to go on record, I can protect you. But it has to be official. It has to be documented. I know, ma'am. He straightened up, some of that military bearing returning. That's why I'm telling you now. I've got 6 years in the Corps. I love the Marines. But not like this. Not with someone like Brennan making us all look bad. He paused. There's something else you should know. I'm not the only one. There are others who've been on the wrong end of his training methods. But they're scared. Scared of retaliation. Scared of getting blacklisted. Get me names, quietly. No official approach yet. Just names of people who might be willing to talk if they knew they had protection. She pulled out a card with her contact information, handed it to him. And Corporal, watch your back. If they moved against Hollister, they won't hesitate with you. He took the card, nodded, and left. Garrett sat alone in the office processing. So it wasn't paranoia, wasn't grief making her see conspiracies and accidents. Brennan had been at that rope, had been tampering with equipment, and when someone tried to report it, Teague himself had shut it down. She pulled out her phone, opened the encrypted message app, typed quickly. Admiral Carson, credible witness to Hollister's death, equipment tampering suspected, needs secure channel for evidence transfer. The response came 30 seconds later. Acknowledged, channel established. Proceed with extreme caution. They're watching. She deleted both messages, then opened her laptop and began pulling up the training logs. If Brennan had a pattern, if he'd done this before, there would be traces. Equipment failures, injuries. Incidents that looked routine on paper but formed a picture when assembled. She'd spent 4 years as a sniper. Patience was her specialty. Waiting for the perfect shot, the moment when everything aligned and the target stepped into view. This was the same. Gather intelligence, identify the pattern, wait for the opening, then take the shot that ended it. The afternoon training session was brutal by any standard. Garrett stood at the edge of the main mat, clipboard in hand, watching Brennan put a dozen recruits through what he called combat stress conditioning. It was essentially controlled drowning on dry land. Each recruit took turns in a submission hold, while their partner applied pressure, simulating the panic of oxygen deprivation without the actual danger. Except the line between simulation and danger was thinner than regulation allowed. She watched Brennan demonstrate on a willing volunteer, a young Marine corporal who'd clearly done this before. The technique was textbook perfect. Rear naked choke, one arm wrapped around the throat, the other supporting behind the head. Brennan talked through it calmly, professionally, explaining the pressure points, the blood flow restriction, the safe duration. You'll feel them tap here. He demonstrated the corporal's hand, slapping his forearm twice. That's your signal. You release immediately. Not after you finish your count, not after you make your point. Immediately. He let go, the corporal gasped and nodded, and the group moved on to practice. Textbook. Perfect. Exactly what the manual prescribed. But Garrett had been around operators long enough to know the difference between what people did when they were being watched and what they did when they thought no one was paying attention. Brennan knew she was there, knew she was documenting, knew every move was being evaluated. This was the sanitized version. The performance. She wanted to see what happened when the performance ended. For the next 2 hours, she took notes. Times, participants, technique, execution. Everything by the book, everything professional. Brennan ran a tight session, no wasted time, clear. Instructions, immediate corrections when someone's form slipped. He was good at this. That was the problem. Good enough to hide the bad. At 1800, the session ended. Recruits filtered out, exhausted and dripping sweat. Brennan approached, her towel around his neck, barely breathing hard. Thoughts, Commander? Your technique is solid. Instruction is clear. She didn't look up from her clipboard. Duration times were within regulation, safety protocols observed. Glad to hear it. He took a drink from a water bottle. You know, Master Chief Hollister used to observe our sessions too. He appreciated what we were trying to accomplish here. Building warriors who don't quit under pressure. She looked up at that, met his eyes. Master Chief Hollister also believed in doing things right, not just hard. Right and hard aren't mutually exclusive, ma'am. No, but hard without right is just brutality. She closed her clipboard. I'll be back tomorrow, Staff Sergeant. Same time. Looking forward to it. She left the training hall conscious again, of eyes tracking her movement. In the parking lot, sitting in her rental car with the windows up and the AC blasting, she finally let herself exhale. The professional mask slipped for just a moment, and underneath was pure, cold fury. Wade Hollister had stood where she stood, had watched Brennan run sessions just like the one she'd witnessed, had seen the same perfect performance, the same by-the-book technique. And he'd known, just like she knew, that it was a lie. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Tomorrow night, 1900 hours, voluntary advanced training, you should see it. A friend. Beckett had to be. Giving her a heads up about something that happened off the official schedule. Something Brennan ran when he thought no one important was watching. She saved the number, then pulled out of the parking lot. She had less than 24 hours to prepare, to plan, to position herself for whatever was coming, because something was definitely coming. She could feel it the way she'd once felt enemy positions before they revealed themselves. The weight of hostile attention, the tension of violence about to break loose. Good. Let it come. She'd survived worse than Reese Brennan. Survived Taliban ambushes and firefights that lasted hours, survived selection and training designed to break the strongest candidates. She'd survived losing the man who'd been like a father to her. She'd survived this too. And when it was over, when the evidence was gathered and the case was built and the truth came out into the light, Brennan would learn the same lesson Wade Hollister had spent 30 years teaching. Discipline wasn't weakness. It was the weapon that never missed. The next morning arrived cold and gray marine layer fog rolling in off the Pacific and settling over Coronado like a wet blanket. Garrett was at the annex by 0530, an hour before official operations began moving through the empty facility with the systematic attention to detail that had kept her alive through 2 combat deployments. She wasn't just familiarizing herself with the layout. She was mapping it. Every camera housing, every blind spot, every piece of equipment that could fail at a convenient moment. The security system was older than it should be, analog cameras feeding into a central recording station tucked away in a maintenance closet. She found it unlocked the equipment, humming quietly in the dim space. A wall of monitors showed grainy feeds from 16 different angles throughout the facility. Training mats, equipment storage, the outdoor obstacle course. Most of the cameras were functioning, their timestamps scrolling steadily in the corners of each frame. Most, but not all. 3 monitors showed nothing but static. She checked the labels beneath each screen. Camera 7 main training floor northeast corner. Camera bar 11 equipment storage annex. Camera 14 outdoor fast rope tower. The tower where Wade Hollister died. Garrett pulled out her phone, photographed the dead feeds, then opened the system log on the ancient computer terminal. The digital record showed intermittent failures going back months. Camera 7 had dropped offline 4 times in the last 60 days, always during evening sessions. Camera 11 showed a similar pattern. And camera 14, the tower camera, had been marked as malfunctioning since 2 days before Hollister's death. Convenient. Too convenient. She was still reviewing the logs when footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. She closed the interface quickly, stepped out of the closet, and nearly collided with a man she didn't recognize. Older, maybe early 60s, with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He wore civilian clothes but carried himself with unmistakable military bearing. "You're up early, Commander." His voice was gravel and smoke, the kind that came from years of shouting orders over gunfire. "Could say the same." She kept her tone neutral, not quite challenging. "And you are Command Master Chief Dalton Reeves, retired." He extended a hand and she shook it. His grip was firm, Alice, the hand of someone who'd spent a lifetime doing hard work. "Though I still consult here from time to time. Oversight, quality control, making sure standards don't slip. Then we're in the same business." "Are we?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her with an intensity that felt like being scanned by radar. "Because from where I stand, Commander Garrett, you're not here for routine oversight. You're here because Wade Hollister was my friend and someone murdered him." The words hung in the narrow hallway like smoke. Garrett's hand drifted toward her sidearm before she caught herself, forced her body back to neutral. "That's a serious accusation, Master Chief. It's a serious situation." Reeves glanced back down the hallway, then gestured toward a small office. "Walk with me." She followed him into what looked like a storage room converted into a makeshift workspace. No windows, just filing cabinets and a desk covered in papers. Reeves closed the door, threw the lock, then turned to face her. "Wade and I served together for 20 years. Desert Storm Panama, a dozen operations you'll never read about in any official record. He was the best SEAL I ever knew." Reeves's voice carried the weight of old grief, barely controlled. "And 6 months ago, I watched his body get loaded into an ambulance because someone wanted him dead. You were here that day." "I was in the observation deck, saw the whole thing." He moved to the desk, pulled a folder from beneath a stack of equipment manuals. Wade knew something was wrong at this facility. Knew it in his gut the same way he knew when an operation was about to go sideways. So he started documenting. Quietly, carefully, building a case. He handed her the folder. Inside were dozens of pages. Incident reports, handwritten notes, photographs of injuries, names and dates going back 2 years. And at the center of nearly every incident, one name kept appearing. Staff Sergeant Reese Brennan. Wade collected all this. Garrett flipped through the pages, her trained eye picking out patterns. Extended holds, excessive force, recruits with injuries that didn't quite match the official explanations. He did, and he was going to submit it through proper channels. File a formal complaint, request a full investigation. Reeves's jaw tightened. Then 2 days before his scheduled meeting with the base commander, the rope broke. Corporal Beckett told me he saw Brennan at the tower that morning. Beckett's a good kid, scared but good. Reeves sat heavily in the desk chair, suddenly looking all of his 62 years. He's not the only one who's seen things, Commander. But when Captain Teague showed up to intimidate him, the message was clear. Keep your mouth shut, or your career ends. And Garrett closed the folder, held it against her chest. Why didn't you come forward? You outrank everyone at this facility. I'm retired, civilian contractor. No authority beyond advisory capacity. The bitterness in his voice was sharp enough to cut. And I had no proof. Wade kept his investigation compartmentalized, didn't tell me everything in case something happened to him. Smart operational security, but it meant when he died, the evidence died with him. Not all of it, Garrett tapped the folder. This is substantial. It's a starting point, but it won't be enough. Not against Teague, not without something definitive. Reeves stood, moved to one of the filing cabinets, and pulled out a small electronic device, a portable hard drive. Wade installed auxiliary motion sensors throughout the facility, off the main grid independent power supply, hidden in equipment housings and structural supports. He knew the official cameras kept malfunctioning. Garrett felt her pulse quicken. Are they still operational? Some of them. I've been maintaining them since he died, waiting for the right moment, the right person. He handed her the drive. The footage is encrypted. Password is Trident 227. That was Wade's Bud's class number. She took the drive, slipped it into her pocket. Why give this to me now? Because you're here for the right reasons. Because you were Wade's legacy, the operator he was most proud of training. Reeves' expression softened slightly. And because last night I got word that Brennan is planning something. A voluntary training session tonight, off schedule, off record. The kind where accidents happen. The text message. Beckett's warning. He's going to come after me. He's going to test you. See if you break. See if you quit. See if you give him an excuse to sideline you the same way he sidelined everyone else who got too close. Reeves moved to the door, unlocked it. But Commander, you need to understand something. Brennan isn't just some rogue instructor. He's a decorated combat veteran with demons he never processed, and Teague has convinced him that aggressive training is the only thing standing between American warriors and failure. In his mind, he's doing the right thing. Doesn't matter what's in his mind if his methods kill people. No, it doesn't. Reeves opened the door, paused. Wade's last words to me were about you. Said if anything happened to him, I should find Commander Nora Garrett. Said you were the one who could finish what he started. His eyes held hers. Don't make me tell him I failed. Then he was gone, disappearing into the facility's morning routine like smoke. Garrett stood alone in the storage room office, the folder in one hand and the hard drive in her pocket, and felt the weight of it all settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just about exposing one bad instructor anymore. This was about institutional protection, about senior officers closing ranks, about a culture that valued results over regulations and punished anyone who questioned the system. Wade Hollister had questioned the system, and it killed him. She wouldn't make the same mistake. She wouldn't question it. She'd document it, expose it, and burn it down with the cold efficiency of someone who'd spent years taking precision shots from a mile away. But first, she had to survive tonight. The day passed in a blur of official duties. Garrett attended morning formation, observed training blocks, reviewed equipment logs, and maintained her professional mask while her mind worked through tactical planning. Brennan ran his sessions with the same textbook precision as the day before. Perfect technique, clear instruction, everything by regulation. The performance continued. But she noticed small things, the way other instructors deferred to him even though he wasn't the senior NCO present, the way recruits tensed slightly when he approached. The silence that fell when he spoke, not the respectful silence of military discipline, but something heavier. Fear dressed up as respect. And she noticed Corporal Beckett staying carefully distant from her during official hours but catching her eye once. A slight nod. Confirmation. Tonight. At 1700, Garrett returned to her temporary quarters on base, a small efficiency unit in the bachelor officer housing. She changed out of her uniform into workout gear, black compression shorts, and a gray Navy PT shirt, taped her hands carefully in methodical wraps that protected the small bones of her fingers and knuckles. Stretched methodically, working through the routine that Wade Hollister had taught her years ago. Preparation saves lives, Nora. His voice echoed in her memory, clear as if he stood beside her. The fight is won or lost before it starts in the decisions you make when you're calm and thinking clearly. She pulled out the Kimber 1911 from her bag, checked the chamber out of habit, then locked it in the room safe. Where she was going, a firearm wouldn't help. This would be settled on the mats in the old way, body against body and will against will. At 1845, she drove back to the annex. The parking lot was less full than during daytime operations, but a dozen vehicles remained. She recognized Brennan's truck, Beckett's sedan. Others she didn't know. The main training hall was lit but quiet. She entered through the side door, found maybe 15 people present, mostly junior instructors and senior recruits, the ones hungry enough or foolish enough to volunteer for extra training. They looked up as she entered, surprise flickering across faces. Brennan stood in the center of the main mat, hands on hips, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Commander Garrett, didn't expect to see you tonight. You put voluntary on the schedule, Staff Sergeant. I volunteer." She moved toward the mat, keeping her movements casual, relaxed. Predators could smell fear. "Unless there's a reason I shouldn't be here." "No reason at all, ma'am. We're just running some advanced conditioning. High-intensity scenarios, combat stress inoculation." He gestured around the facility. "You'll notice the body cameras are off. This is unofficial, unrecorded. We find that recruits respond better without the pressure of documentation." "Interesting approach." She stepped onto the mat, began stretching. "Though it does raise questions about accountability." "Accountability comes from results, Commander. We send warriors into combat who don't break, who don't quit, who keep fighting even when every instinct screams at them to surrender." His voice carried to the watching group. "That kind of resilience isn't built in sanitized conditions. It's forged in the fire." Master Chief Hollister had a different philosophy. He believed discipline and intensity weren't mutually exclusive. Something flickered in Brennan's eyes, anger maybe, or recognition that she'd just invoked a name that carried weight. Master Chief Hollister was a great SEAL, but he came from a different era. The enemy has evolved. Our training has to evolve with it, or we abandon the principles that made us effective in the first place. She finished stretching, straightened. "But I'm not here to debate philosophy, Staff Sergeant. You're running a training session. I'm observing. So let's see what you've got." The next hour was controlled violence. Brennan put the group through scenarios that pushed every physical and mental limit. Grappling drills that went past the point of fatigue. Submission holds held longer than regulation. Controlled aggression that occasionally slipped past, controlled into something darker. Garrett watched it all, committing everything to memory. The techniques were sound, the instruction clear, but the intensity crossed lines that existed for good reasons. She saw a young Marine tap out of a triangle, choke the signal clear and desperate, and watched Brennan hold it for 3 additional seconds before releasing. Saw the kid gasp and cough, tears streaming, while Brennan stood over him. In combat, the enemy doesn't let go when you tap. You fight until you escape or you die. It was the same logic, the same justification. And on the surface, it even made a twisted kind of sense. But there was a difference between training that simulated stress and training that inflicted trauma. Wade Hollister had known that difference, had tried to teach it. At 20:30, Brennan called a break. Most of the group collapsed onto benches, gasping, reaching for water bottles. But Brennan's attention focused on Garrett. "Commander, you have been observing for a while. Care to participate? Get a feel for what we're actually doing here?" It was the trap she'd been waiting for. The moment when he'd test whether she could back up her SEAL credentials or whether she was just another oversight officer who'd lost their edge behind a desk. "What did you have in mind, Staff Sergeant?" "Basic scenario, you and me demonstration bout. Show the recruits what proper technique looks like when executed by experienced operators." He smiled, all professional courtesy. "Unless you'd prefer not to." Declining would mark her as soft as someone who wouldn't put herself at the same risk she expected of others. But accepting meant stepping into his world on his terms, without cameras or official witnesses. In the corner, she caught Beckett's eye. He gave the slightest shake of his head. A warning. She smiled coldly. "Let's go, Staff Sergeant." They squared off on the center mat. No protective gear, no referee, just two trained operators and the space between them. The watching group formed a loose circle, quiet, now sensing that this was more than a demonstration. "Standard rules," Brennan announced. "Submission holds controlled strikes, tap out ends the engagement." He rolled his shoulders loose and confident. "Commander, ready when you are." They circled, once testing distance and timing. Garrett moved with the economy of motion that came from years of operational experience. No wasted energy, every step deliberate. Brennan matched her, also efficient, but with an edge of aggression barely held in check. He struck first a testing jab that she slipped easily. She countered with a low kick that he checked, both of them feeling out range and reflexes. For 30 seconds, it was exactly what Brennan had promised. A demonstration between peers, technical and controlled. Then he shot in for a takedown, his level change explosive and well-timed. Garrett sprawled, defending with textbook form, but he adjusted mid-motion and drove her backward. They hit the mat hard, his weight pressing down, and she felt his forearm slide across her throat. Not yet locked in, still defensive position. She worked her hips, created space, started to escape. That's when his weight shifted, when the pressure increased past what the situation called for, when she felt his forearm bar across her trachea with intent that went beyond demonstration. Her hands came up, found his wrist, tried to relieve the pressure. But he was strong, experienced, and he knew exactly what he was doing. She tapped once. Clear signal. "Release me." He held. She tapped twice. "Emergency signal. You're exceeding protocol." He held. 4 seconds. 5 seconds. Her vision began to tunnel, that familiar narrowing, as oxygen deprivation took hold. 6 seconds. 7 seconds. The watching faces blurred, and somewhere in the distance, she heard someone shout. Beckett maybe, or another instructor. But the sound came from very far away. 8.6 seconds. Then finally he released. Garrett collapsed onto the mat, gasping, her throat on fire, and her vision swimming. She felt hands helping her sit up, heard Brennan's voice from somewhere above. "You all right, Commander?" Sometimes in the moment, in the intensity, the signals get missed. She couldn't speak, yet could only focus on dragging air back into her lungs. Her hands went to her throat, felt the heat already building there, the bruising that would blossom dark by morning. And in that moment, flat on her back and struggling to breathe, she felt the ghost of that day in Helmand. The day Wade saved her life by throwing himself into enemy fire. The day she learned that panic kills, but discipline saves. His voice cut through the memory, through the present pain, as clear as if he stood beside her. "Stay calm, Nora. Breathe. Think. Survive." She forced herself upright, waved off the helping hands, and stood on legs that barely held her weight. Brennan watched her with something like satisfaction, the mask of professional concern barely hiding it. "Guess I held that a little longer than intended. These things happen in live training." Garrett met his eyes, let him see absolutely nothing in hers. No fear, no anger, no acknowledgement that he'd just crossed a line. She just looked at him for 3 long seconds, then turned and walked off the mat. In the locker room alone, she let herself lean against the cold tile wall and shake. Not from fear, from rage so pure it felt like standing too close to a jet engine. He'd done exactly what Wade Hollister had documented. Exactly what had gotten others hurt, intimidated into silence, driven away. And he'd done it to her on her second day to send a message. "This is my facility. Challenge me, and this is what happens." She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, opened the camera, and photographed the bruising already forming on her throat. Documented the time, the date, the location. Then she texted Reeves, "It happened. Need to talk. Secure location." The response came immediately. "Storage office, 20 minutes. Come alone." Garrett cleaned herself up, changed into street clothes, and left through the side exit. She didn't look back at the training hall, didn't acknowledge the few remaining vehicles in the parking lot. She simply drove off. Base circled back through a different gate using her military ID and parked 3 buildings away from the annex. The facility was dark now, official operations over for the night. She used her access code to enter through a rear door, moved through the shadowed hallways with practiced silence, and found Reeves waiting in the storage office. He took one look at her throat, and his weathered face went hard as stone. Went Kibo, 30 minutes ago, voluntary training session, no cameras demonstration bout. She handed him her phone showing the photographs. He held 8.6 seconds past tap protocol. Had witnesses, but they're all in his camp. Reeves was already pulling out the portable hard drive, connecting it to his laptop. Wade's auxiliary sensors should have captured it. Camera placement is designed for blind spots in the official system. His fingers flew across the keyboard, entering passwords, navigating encrypted directories. If the sensors were active, if the battery backup held, the screen flickered. Grainy footage appeared, infrared imaging, showing heat signatures against dark backgrounds. The angle was from somewhere up in the rafters, looking down on the main training mat. Garrett watched herself and Brennan, circle engage, go to the ground. Watched his arm lock across her throat. Watched herself tap once, twice. Watched her body begin to go slack, while he held and held and held. The timestamp in the corner was merciless, 8.6 seconds from first tap to release. "Got you," Reeves breathed. "We've got him." But Garrett was shaking her head. "It's not enough. One incident, first-person perspective, footage from an unauthorized camera system. His lawyers will argue it was a training accident, a missed signal in the heat of the moment. We need pattern. We need multiple incidents. Then we wait for him to do it again." "No." Her voice was steel. "We create the conditions where he'll do it again, but this time we control the circumstances." She straightened the plan, forming even as she spoke. "I'm going to request a formal combat readiness evaluation. Official demonstration with JAG observers and command presence. I'll put Brennan as the lead demonstrator. He'll be on his best behavior, everything by the book, until I give him a reason not to be, until I put him in a position in where his ego and his pattern override his discipline." She met Reeves' eyes. "Wade died building this case. Beckett and others risked their careers trying to stop this. I'm not going to let it keep happening." Reeves studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're setting a trap. I'm following regulation. Brennan's the one who will spring the trap." She pulled out her phone, began drafting the request. "I need you to make sure every auxiliary sensor is operational and recording. And I need Beckett ready to testify if this goes to formal proceedings. Beckett's scared. Teague already intimidated him once. Then we protect him, give him cover, make it impossible for retaliation." Her fingers moved across the screen, precise and methodical. "This is going to work, Master Chief, because Brennan can't help himself. He's done this so many times, gotten away with it so many times that he thinks he's untouchable. That's his weakness. And if you're wrong, if he controls himself during the demonstration, then we have footage of him nearly choking out a superior officer during unauthorized training. We take what we have and we build from there." She hit send on the email, the request going up through official channels to base command and inevitably to Captain Teague. "But I'm not wrong. Men like Brennan always make the same mistake. They think power is the same as being right." Reeves saved the footage to multiple backup drives, then handed one to Garrett. "Wade would be proud of you. Wade would tell me I'm being reckless. He'd tell you that too." The old SEAL almost smiled. "But he'd be proud anyway." Garrett left the office, the backup drive secured in her pocket along with the folder of Wade's documentation. She had less than 48 hours before the formal evaluation would be scheduled. 48 hours to prepare, to position all the pieces to make sure that when Brennan made his move, it would be the last one he ever made in a military training facility. In her car, alone in the dark parking lot, she allowed herself one moment of vulnerability. Her hand drifted to her throat, felt the tender bruising, and she closed her eyes against the memory of Helmand Province, against the weight of what she was about to do. "I'm finishing it, Master Chief," she whispered to the ghost that had haunted her for 6 months. "No matter what it costs, I'm finishing what you started." Then she started the engine and drove into the California night, a warrior carrying proof of institutional corruption and the determination to see justice done. Reese Brennan had sent his message. Now it was her turn to respond. And when she did, it wouldn't be with violence or intimidation or any of the tools he understood. It would be with the one weapon he couldn't defend against, the truth documented and undeniable, wielded with the precision of a sniper's shot. The reckoning was coming, and this time protocol would hit back harder than any fist ever could. The notification came through official channels at 0847 the next morning. Commander Garrett sat in her temporary quarters, coffee cooling on the desk beside her laptop, and read the email from Base Command 3 times to make sure she understood every word. Combat Integration Program, formal evaluation scheduled for Friday, 1600 hours. Lead demonstrator, Staff Sergeant Reese Brennan, USMC. Observers, Captain Marshall Teague, JSOC. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Vance, JAG. Base Commander authorization granted. All personnel will report in dress uniform. Facility recording systems will be active and monitored. 48 hours. She'd asked for an evaluation and they'd given her one, but the observer list made her stomach tighten. Teague would be there, Brennan's protector and former commanding officer, the man who'd shut down investigations and intimidated witnesses. His presence was both a threat and an opportunity. He'd come to protect his Marine, which meant he'd be watching when everything fell apart. Her phone buzzed. Text from Reeves. Saw the notification, all systems green on our end. The auxiliary sensors are active and backed up to 3 separate secure servers. Whatever happens, we'll have proof. She typed back, Beckett ready. He's scared but steady. I've been working with him. He'll hold. Garrett closed the laptop and moved to the window. Outside, early morning sun burned through the last of the marine layer, illuminating Coronado in harsh California light. In less than 2 days, she would stand in front of Base Command JAG and the man who'd killed Wade Hollister, and she would trigger the final confrontation. Everything she'd worked for, everything Wade had died for, compressed into one demonstration that would either expose the truth or end her career. No pressure. She spent the morning at the annex maintaining her official duties, observing training sessions, and documenting everything with mechanical precision. Brennan ran his morning block with the same textbook perfection he'd shown since she arrived. Clean technique, clear instruction, perfect adherence to protocol. He knew the formal evaluation was coming. He'd been warned, probably by Teague himself, to keep everything pristine, but she caught him watching her. Small glances when he thought she wasn't looking, calculating stares that measured and assessed. He knew she'd requested the evaluation, knew it wasn't routine oversight, and somewhere behind those cold eyes, he was planning his own response. Good. Let him plan. She'd spent 4 years as a sniper learning that the best plans accounted for what the enemy would do, not what you hoped they'd do. Brennan would try to control the demonstration to perform perfectly and make her look paranoid for requesting official scrutiny, but men with patterns couldn't break them under pressure. They doubled down. At 1200, she was reviewing equipment logs when Corporal Beckett appeared in the office doorway. He looked drawn pale, like he hadn't slept in days. Ma'am, do you have a minute? She closed the door behind him, kept her voice low. What's wrong? Captain Teague was here this morning, before you arrived. Beckett's hands twisted together, nervous energy, with nowhere to go. He pulled me aside, asked me about my statement, the one I withdrew about Master Chief Hollister's accident. Ice formed in Garrett's chest. What did he say? That he heard I'd been talking to Oversight, that he hoped I wasn't reconsidering my position because false accusations against decorated Marines have a way of ruining careers. Beckett met her eyes. Ma'am, he knows. Somehow he knows I talked to you. Did you tell him anything? No, ma'am, but he made it clear that if I testify at this evaluation, if I say anything that contradicts the official narrative of I'm done, not just here, everywhere. Garrett moved to the window mine, working through the angles. Teague was smart, had to be to make captain in JSOC. He'd seen her request for evaluation, connected it to Beckett's earlier statement, and moved to shore up the weak point in his defenses. Classic counterintelligence. Identify the vulnerability and neutralize it before it becomes a threat. Corporal, I'm going to be direct with you. What I'm about to do is going to be dangerous for everyone involved. Teague has power connections and the will to use both. If you back out now, if you decide your career is more important than the truth, I'll understand. Beckett was quiet for a long moment. Then he straightened and something in his posture changed. The fear was still there, but underneath it, steel. Master Chief Hollister died because he tried to do the right thing. I'm not going to dishonor his memory by doing the wrong thing to save myself. He pulled out his phone, opened the video app. I've got footage from that night training session. When Brennan choked you, it's not great quality, but you can see everything. The hold, the taps, how long he waited. She took the phone, watched the grainy video. It was exactly what Reeves's sensors had captured, just from a different angle. A third piece of evidence, a third source, all showing the same damning truth. Send it to this email address. She wrote down a secure account she'd set up through Admiral Carson's office. Encrypted, then deleted it from your phone and your cloud backup. If Teague checks your devices, there can't be any trace. Yes, ma'am. He started the transfer, then looked up. Commander, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Are we going to win this? It was the question she'd been asking herself since Wade died. The question that kept her awake at night, that made her second-guess every decision. But standing here looking at a young Marine who'd found the courage to stand up, despite the cost, she knew there was only one answer she could give. Yes, Corporal, we're going to win. Because the truth doesn't care about rank or politics or who has more powerful friends. It just is. And once it's in the light, once everyone can see it, not even Teague can make it disappear. She hoped she was right. The next 36 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Garrett coordinated with Reeves to ensure every auxiliary sensor would be operational during the evaluation. She reviewed the facility layout with tactical precision, identifying sight lines and camera positions, making sure there would be no blind spots when the moment came. She drafted her statement for JAG Clinical and detailed laying out the pattern of violations without emotional embellishment. And she trained. Spent hours in the base gym, working through grappling scenarios, drilling escapes from submission holds, preparing her body for what was coming. Because she knew with the certainty that came from years of combat experience that Brennan would try something during the demonstration. His ego wouldn't allow anything else. Friday morning arrived with cloudless skies and temperatures already climbing toward 80. Garrett dressed in her service khakis, the dress uniform crisp and perfect, her ribbons arranged in precise rows above her left breast pocket, 2 Purple Hearts from her Afghanistan tours, a Bronze Star with Valor device, the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, and at the top, the SEAL Trident Gold Eagle clutching an Anchor flintlock pistol and trident in its talons. She pinned Wade Hollister's original trident next to her own. Reeves had given it to her the night before, pressed it into her hand without words. It was worn smooth from decades of wear, the gold dulled, but somehow more real for it. For luck, Master Chief, she whispered to the empty room, and for justice. At 15:30, she arrived at the annex. The main training hall had been transformed. The usual casual chaos of equipment and personnel replaced by military formality. Chairs arranged in rows facing the demonstration mat. A table for the observers set up with recording equipment and official documentation. Maybe 60 people present, a mix of base personnel, training staff, and senior enlisted who'd heard something significant was happening. Captain Marshall Teague stood near the observers table, talking quietly with the JAG representative. He was exactly what Central Casting would send for a JSOC captain, 6 feet of coiled aggression in a dress uniform, chest full of ribbons, the predatory awareness of someone trained to read threats. He glanced up as Garrett entered, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, calculation, threat assessment. She maintained neutral expression and moved to her assigned position. Across the mat, Brennan stood with several other instructors also in dress uniform. He looked calm, confident, every inch the decorated Marine. And why wouldn't he be? He'd done this 100 times, always emerged untouched, always protected by the system. Today would be different. At 1600 precisely, the base commander called the room to attention. Commander Richard Walsh, a submariner by trade but responsible for all base operations, took position at the center table. Late 50s balding with the kind of bureaucratic efficiency that kept complex organizations running. This evaluation is convened at the request of Lieutenant Commander Nora Garrett, Oversight Officer for the Combat Integration Program. Walsh's voice carried across the space without amplification. The purpose is to assess current training protocols and ensure full compliance with Navy safety regulations. Staff Sergeant Brennan will demonstrate standard techniques. All proceedings are being recorded for official review. He nodded to Teague, acknowledging the senior officer present. Teague's face remained neutral, but Garrett caught the tension in his jaw. He didn't want to be here, didn't want his Marine under official scrutiny, but refusing to attend would have raised more questions than his presence answered. Walsh turned to Garrett. Commander, you have specific protocols you wish to evaluate. Yes, sir. Submission hold applications and tap-out procedures. Specifically, response time between signal and release. She kept her voice professional, clinical. Recent observations have raised questions about consistency with established safety standards. Very well. Staff Sergeant Brennan, you will demonstrate proper technique with a volunteer partner. Clear communication by the book execution. Walsh sat. Proceed when ready. Brennan stepped onto the mat with Corporal Beckett. Of course, he'd chosen Beckett deliberately, the one witness who'd already been intimidated into silence, making him complicit in the performance. Beckett's face was carefully blank, but Garrett saw the tension in his shoulders. They demonstrated a rear naked choke, Brennan explaining each step with professional precision. Hand placement, pressure application, the physiological effects of blood flow. Restriction. Beckett played the victim, signaling tap out at the appropriate moment. Brennan released instantly, textbook perfect. As you can see, Brennan addressed the room. Proper technique allows for immediate release upon signal. The tap is sacrosanct. It ends the engagement, no exceptions. He ran through 3 more demonstrations. Triangle choke, arm bar, guillotine. Everyone executed flawlessly, every release immediate and controlled. The watching personnel nodded along. This was a professional, competent instructor demonstrating exactly what the manual prescribed. Garrett waited. Let him establish the baseline, let him perform his perfect routine. Then she stood. Staff Sergeant requests permission to participate in the final demonstration. The room went quiet. Brennan turned, and for just a fraction of a second she saw it. The flash of something dark behind his professional mask. Then it was gone, replaced by courteous neutrality. Of course, Commander. What scenario did you have in mind? Resistant opponent, full speed application. You demonstrate proper override technique when the subject actively defends. She moved onto the mat, began stretching. Real combat conditions as close as training allows. Teague leaned forward in his chair. Commander Garrett, is that necessary? The staff sergeant has already demonstrated proficiency. Sir, with respect, the scenarios demonstrated were compliant partners. I'd like to evaluate technique against resistance. She met Teague's stare without flinching. Unless there's a reason that's inappropriate, Walsh intervened before Teague could respond. The request is reasonable. Staff Sergeant, are you comfortable with this scenario? Brennan rolled his shoulders and that cold smile returned. Absolutely, sir. Happy to demonstrate. They squared off on the center mat. Garrett was conscious of every eye in the room locked on them, of the cameras recording from multiple angles of Reeves somewhere in the facility, monitoring the auxiliary sensors. This was it. The moment Wade Hollister had been building toward the confrontation that would either expose the truth or bury it forever. They engaged. Brennan moved first, testing with strikes that she deflected and countered. For the first 30 seconds, it was professional sparring between trained operators. Then he shot in for a takedown explosive and committed, driving her backward with controlled aggression. She sprawled, defended, but he'd anticipated it and adjusted mid-motion. His weight crashed into her, taking them both to the mat, and she felt his positioning shift as he worked toward back control. This was the critical moment. She could escape now, force a reset, keep this demonstration clean and inconclusive, or she could let him think he was winning. She gave him the position. Let him take her back. Let his arms snake around her throat. Let him sink the rear naked choke with practiced efficiency. His forearm barred across her windpipe, and she felt the familiar pressure building. Not crushing, not yet, but deliberate and controlled. Then she tapped his wrist. Once, clear and unmistakable. He held. She counted in her head. 1, 2, 3 seconds. Tapped again, harder, the emergency signal that should trigger immediate release. He held. 4 seconds. 5. The pressure increased incrementally, just enough to make her vision start to narrow. Around them, she heard murmurs from the watching crowd. Someone said something sharp, but the words didn't quite register through the roaring in her ears. 6 seconds. 7. She was fighting now, not for the demonstration, but from genuine need, her body's autonomic response to oxygen deprivation. Her fingers clawed at his forearm. Her legs kicked, and somewhere very far away she heard Beckett shouting. 8 seconds. 9. 10. 11. Then finally he released. Garrett collapsed forward, gasping, her throat screaming, and her vision swimming with dark spots. She felt hands helping her sit up, heard urgent voices asking if she was okay. But through it all, through the pain and the oxygen deprivation threatening to drag her under, she heard Brennan's voice. "Apologies, Commander. You were defending aggressively. Hard to read the signals in real-time combat scenarios." She couldn't speak yet, could only focus on breathing, on forcing air back into her lungs while her body screamed at her. But her mind was perfectly clear, counting off the seconds with mechanical precision. 11 seconds. He'd held for 11 seconds past her first tap. Walsh was on his feet. "Staff Sergeant, that was excessive," Commander Garrett signaled clearly, multiple times. "Sir, with respect, combat scenarios are chaotic. In the moment, distinguishing between defensive movement and tap signals requires judgment." Brennan's voice carried perfect professional concern. "I released as soon as I was certain of her intent." "That's bullshit." Beckett, the young corporal who'd been intimidated into silence, threatened into compliance, told his career would end if he spoke up. He stood now, phone in hand, face pale but resolute. "That's 11 seconds from first tap to release. I timed it, and it's not the first time." He looked at Teague, and Garrett saw fear there. Yes, but something stronger underneath. "This is exactly what he did to me 4 months ago. Exactly what he did to PFC Rodriguez last year. Exactly what he did before Master Chief Hollister died." The room erupted, multiple voices shouting questions, denials, demands for order. Walsh stood calling for quiet, but the chaos had already broken containment. And in that chaos, Garrett pulled herself upright and spoke 4 words that cut through everything else. "Show them the footage." Reeves appeared from the equipment room, laptop in hand. He moved to the observer's table connected to the display system, and suddenly the wall-mounted screens flickered to life. Split-screen footage showing multiple angles of what had just happened. The timestamps in the corners were merciless, counting off each second of the hold in digital precision. But it wasn't just the demonstration. Reeves played the footage from the night training session, showed Brennan choking Garrett into near unconsciousness, showed the 14 seconds of hold pass protocol call, showed the pattern that Garrett's testimony alone couldn't prove. Then older footage, incidents from months past captured by Wade's hidden sensors. Different victims, same technique. The pattern laid bare for everyone to see. Teague was on his feet. "This footage is inadmissible. Unauthorized surveillance, chain of custody compromised, inadmissible in any formal proceeding." "You're right, Captain." The JAG representative, Lieutenant Commander Vance, spoke for the first time. She was younger than Garrett expected, early 30s, with the focused assessment of a prosecutor spotting weakness. "In a court-martial, we'd have evidentiary challenges. But this isn't a court-martial. This is an administrative review." She turned to Walsh. "Sir, I've seen enough to recommend immediate suspension pending formal investigation." Walsh nodded slowly, his bureaucratic efficiency adapting to new information. "Staff Sergeant Brennan, you are relieved of duty, effective immediately. You will surrender your facility access and report to base legal for interview." He looked at Teague. "Captain, given your prior relationship with the Staff Sergeant, I'm requesting JSOC assign a different officer to liaison during this investigation." "Commander Walsh, you're making a serious mistake based on questionable evidence. And with Captain Teague," Vance's voice was steel-wrapped in professional courtesy, "I've also been reviewing documentation provided by Commander Garrett. Documentation that shows you personally intervened in 3 prior complaints against Staff Sergeant Brennan. That creates, at minimum, the appearance of impropriety. At worst, it's obstruction of justice." Teague's face went hard. "I was protecting a decorated Marine from false accusations. You were protecting your command philosophy from accountability." Garrett found her voice raw and damaged but clear. "You convinced Staff Sergeant Brennan that aggressive training was necessary, that regulations were obstacles instead of safeguards. And when people got hurt, when Master Chief Hollister tried to stop it, you made those problems disappear. You have no proof of that. I have Wade Hollister's documentation, 6 months of incident reports, witness statements, equipment inspection records." She pulled out the folder Reeves had given her, handed it to Vance, including his final notes from the day before he died. Notes that specifically mentioned concerns about equipment tampering and a planned meeting with base command that never happened because a rope mysteriously failed. The room had gone absolutely silent. Every eye moved between Garrett, Teague, and the screens, still showing damning footage on endless loop. Walsh looked older suddenly, the weight of what he was hearing pressing down on him. Captain Teague, you're also relieved pending investigation. Lieutenant Commander Vance, I'm requesting JAG take lead on a full review of this program and all related incidents. He turned to Garrett. Commander, you'll make yourself available for complete testimony. Yes, sir. Brennan hadn't moved, stood frozen on the mat, watching his world collapse in real time. Garrett approached him, keeping 2 arm lengths distance, and spoke quietly enough that only he could hear. Master Chief Hollister believed in this program, believed we could train warriors with honor and discipline. He died trying to prove it. She met his eyes. You could have been part of that legacy. Instead, you became everything he fought against. Something flickered across Brennan's face. Not quite remorse, but recognition, maybe. The first crack in the armor. I was trying to make them strong, to prepare them for what's really out there. No, you were breaking them to prove you could. There's a difference. She stepped back. Master Chief could have taught you that, if you'd listened. Security personnel appeared to escort Brennan off the facility. He went quietly, the shoulders slumped, the confidence and aggression draining away with each step. Teague followed under his own power, but his exit was no less final. The man who'd protected a toxic culture, who'd valued results over regulations, watching his career end in a training facility he'd tried so hard to control. After they left the room, slowly emptied. Personnel filtering out in small groups, processing what they'd witnessed. Beckett approached Garrett, stood at attention. Ma'am, I just wanted to say, you did good, Corporal. Took courage to speak up when it mattered. She managed a small smile despite the pain in her throat. Master Chief Hollister would have been proud. He nodded, unable to speak, and left. Finally, it was just Garrett, Reeves, and Walsh remaining in the hall. The base commander looked at the two of them, shook his head slowly. This should never have gotten this far. Should never have taken a SEAL commander nearly dying to expose it. No, sir, it shouldn't have. Garrett's voice was hoarse, every word painful. But it did, and now we make sure it never happens again. Agreed. Commander, once you're cleared by medical, I'd like to discuss your taking a leadership role in restructuring this program. We need someone who understands both operational necessity and regulatory compliance. She glanced at Reeves, who nodded slightly. I'd be honored, sir. Walsh left. The screens finally went dark, the footage stopped looping. Reeves moved to stand beside her, looking down at the mat where it had all happened. Wade would have handled it differently. He'd have built an airtight case, submitted it through proper channels, let the system work. The system killed him, Master Chief. I know. Reeves pulled out a small box from his pocket, opened it. Inside was a Navy Cross, the service's second highest decoration for valor. This arrived yesterday, posthumous award for Wade. They're calling it recognition of his career-long dedication to training excellence and integrity. They're calling it that now, after he's fled and can't embarrass them anymore. Yes, Reeves closed the box. But he was right, Commander. About the program, about the principles, about you. He knew you'd finish what he started. Garrett felt the weight of the last 6 months pressing down. The grief, the rage, the determination that had driven her through every moment since that phone call. And underneath it all, the memory of a man who'd saved her life and then spent years teaching her how to save others. I miss him. So do I. Reeves headed for the door, paused. Get that throat checked. And Commander, you did good work here. The kind that matters. After he left, Garrett stood alone in the empty training hall. Her throat ached, her body was bruised, and she knew the administrative battles were just beginning. Formal investigations, testimony, paperwork that would consume months. But the important part was done. The truth was in the light, documented and undeniable. She pulled out her phone, looked at the photograph she'd carried for 6 months. Her and Wade at the rifle range, both grinning, covered in dirt and accomplishment. She touched the screen gently. Mission complete, Master Chief. The program's going to change. We're going to do it right this time. Your way. A week later, Garrett stood in front of a new class of instructors. 23 men and women from multiple service branches, all selected for the Reformed Combat Integration Program. Beckett stood among them, promoted to sergeant and assigned as her second in command. The facility had been scrubbed and reorganized, new protocols implemented, independent oversight established. On the wall behind her, a memorial plaque, Master Chief Wade Hollister, USN, 1963-2024. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. She began the briefing. You're here because you represent the next evolution of combat training. High-intensity preparation that doesn't sacrifice safety for results. Aggressive conditioning that maintains respect for regulations. We're going to prove that honor and effectiveness aren't mutually exclusive. She paused, let that sink in. Master Chief Hollister spent 30 years fighting for this program, died trying to make it right. We're going to honor his legacy by training warriors who are as disciplined as they are dangerous, who understand that tap-out protocol isn't weakness. It's the foundation of trust that makes aggressive training possible. She spent the next hour outlining the new curriculum, mandatory recording systems, independent safety observers, anonymous reporting channels, and a zero-tolerance policy for violations that would be enforced from day one. After the briefing, Beckett approached. Think it'll work, ma'am? Think we can really change the culture? Garrett looked around the facility, seeing it not as it was, but as it could be. Yes, Sergeant, because this time we're not trying to change it alone. This time the system is backing us instead of fighting us. That evening, she returned to her quarters to find a package waiting. No return address, just her name in careful handwriting. Inside was a book, worn leather binding pages marked with dozens of notes and highlights. Wade Hollister's personal training journal, 3 decades of hard-won wisdom distilled into handwritten observations. A note was tucked inside the front cover, Wade's handwriting unmistakable. Nora, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've done what needed doing. I always knew you had the strength for it. Remember that discipline isn't about following rules blindly. It's about having the courage to enforce them when everyone else looks away. Make them better. Make them remember why we do this. The warriors who come after us deserve instructors who will push them hard and keep them safe. Be that instructor. Be that leader. Make me proud. Wade. She sat on the edge of her bed, the journal in her lap, and let herself cry for the first time since that phone call 6 months ago. Cried for the mentor she'd lost, for the broken system she'd exposed, for the cost of doing what was right when the world wanted you to look away. Then she dried her eyes, opened the journal, and began to read. Wade's wisdom, his techniques, his philosophy of training that balanced intensity with integrity. She would learn it all, implement it all, and pass it on to the next generation. Master Chief Wade Hollister had believed that one person with courage could change a system. He'd proved it with his life. Now she would prove it with hers. The next morning, Garrett was back at the annex at 05:30. New instructors were already arriving, eager and nervous, ready to learn a different way. She greeted each one, learned their names, began building the relationships that would form the foundation of trust. At 0600, she stood on the mat where Brennan had tried to break her, where the truth had finally come to light, and called the first formation of the new program. Good morning, I'm Commander Nora Garrett, and this is where we begin. Not with intimidation, not with fear, but with respect. Respect for each other, respect for the mission, and respect for the regulations that keep us alive to fight another day. She looked at their faces, saw potential and determination, saw the future of combat training looking back at her. Master Chief Wade Hollister once told me that the strongest warriors don't break the rules. They enforce them. Today we start proving he was right. Today we show that discipline and intensity aren't opposites. They're partners. And together they produce operators who don't just survive combat. She smiled, feeling Wade's presence like a hand on her shoulder. They excel at it. The training began, and on the wall behind her, Wade Hollister's memorial plaque caught the morning light, his words a promise and a challenge to everyone who entered that hall. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. They crossed that bridge together. The right way. Wade's way. The way of warriors who understood that true strength wasn't about how hard you could hit. It was about knowing when to hold and when to let go.